right, we're going to get going today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is our follow-up session from Suite World. If you weren't able to join us in person, we gave a great presentation in one of the breakout rooms at Suite World, and today we're going to run it back for you guys. So today we're going to talk about the overall quote to cash to revenue process, particularly with a focus on software technology companies. So today we're going to go through a few things. First, I'll just give an overview of the revenue lifecycle management process and all of the different components as part of that workflow. We're going to talk about things that are shaping the current landscape of quote to cash and revenue lifecycle. Then we're going to unpack 3 different common approaches that we see to addressing recurring billing and revenue recognition. We'll give a brief overview of our solution, ZoneBilling, and how that fits into the overall revenue lifecycle process. And then we're also going to end with a demo. So we're going to demo an end-to-end Salesforce CPQ integration to NetSuite with ZoneBilling and using NetSuite's revenue recognition end-to-end, not only for a new sale, but also walk through upsells and a few amendments there. So excited for today's presentation. We'll do a quick round of introductions to start. My name is Brad. I've been at Zone now for 7.5 years. I previously worked at NetSuite for about 3 years or so. So it's been over a decade working with NetSuite customers, particularly focused on software technology companies. So I've been focused on the order to cash process. My background before getting into the ERP space was in accounting. So I started my early career as an accountant. I implemented ERP, I used and implemented billing and RevRec solutions, and sort of brought that that experience towards what I do now. I'm also joined by Aaron and Bobby, if you guys want to say hello as well.
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Martin. I'm the director of our NetSuite team here at SaaS Consulting Group. Been at SaaS Consulting Group for about 5 years, almost exactly, and was also at NetSuite for about 4.5 years prior to coming here. So I work, as Brad said, we work primarily with software and services, vertical companies, doing a full lead to cash transformation. So we have a Salesforce practice, an integrations practice, and a NetSuite practice, and we work with companies to build out their lead to cash flow and make it successful. So a lot of our customers do use Zone, and that's why we're here today. Bobby?
Hi, my name is Bobby Brown. I'm a solution architect on the order to cash team here at SaaS Consulting Group. I've been at SCG for about 8 years and have been doing Zone implementations for close to 6 of those. And I really focus on both the NetSuite side of billing and the revenue recognition optimization, along with working very closely with our Salesforce CPQ and integration teams.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron and Bobby, for joining us today. Okay, so I'm going to start with first just a little bit of an overview of the revenue lifecycle process. I think traditionally it still is referred to as quote to cash, but I think in some ways quote to cash oversimplifies what the modern revenue lifecycle process requires. So when you think about this end-to-end, just starting with the teams, we have to consider the teams for revenue operations or sales ops, mostly on the sales side and the CRM side, as well as the finance and accounting operations on the ERP side, and then additionally data side, data operations for analytics and reporting. So if you're looking at the end-to-end process flow, on both tail ends of this is the front end CRM, and then 2, the back end ERP system, which is where all obviously GL transactions are posted. But when you really break down this process, there are so many different components that all impact the other. And a lot of times when we work with customers and they come to us with either a RevRec challenge or a billing challenge or a usage challenge or even a CPQ challenge, a lot of times the answer is not just fixing one of those things. The answer is fixing the entire process. And that starts all the way with the product catalog. Really thoughtfully curating a product catalog and pricing models that are going to scale with you, that have some standardization and some rules built in. How do those product catalog then interact with a CPQ system so that the sales team and the account management team has the ability to accurately quote the customer with flexibility to structure pricing and discounts and terms in ways that help them win deals. After the initial sale, how easy is it to manage the contract in terms of additions, subtractions, upsells, downsells, cancellations, amendments? All customers today, are a wide majority of them, are adopting usage-based billing. So how do we incorporate usage data? How do we structure that data, organize that data, cleanse that data, enrich that data so that it's ready to eventually then also send to a billing tool? We need the billing tool to be able to generate invoices at the right times, to the right people, for the right amounts, for the right products. Customers want to be able to log in and view their contract, view their invoices, make payments. On the accounting side, we need to manage collections and dunnings to make sure that we can keep DSO at a reasonable level. And then, of course, for GAAP compliance, we need to recognize revenue according to ASC 606 and for IFRS 15 globally. So there's so many different components to this overall process. And that's why, down below, you can just see why it's so important to, one, prioritize this within your organizations, and then two, get it right. Within a software company, this order to cash or revenue lifecycle process is the lifeblood of the organization. This is your competitive advantage over your other competitors. Those who are able to react quickly and be more agile ultimately come out on top. This is by far the most important process, especially for pure software companies. There's not a lot of inventory to manage. There's not, physical goods or hardwares or warehouses. I mean, this is what you guys do. This is, you're managing contracts and managing upsells, downsells, and the whole process here. Those who do take the time to prioritize and address this is where you experience reduced margins. We work with a lot of private equity-backed company who are focused on their rule of 40, their gross margins. They're focused on net revenue retention, gross revenue retention, and the revenue lifecycle process absolutely impacts a lot of those metrics. And those who are looking to improve a lot of their metrics for higher exits and higher valuations, I mean, this is how you do it within a software technology company. Moving on to talk about the customer experience. When you think about this process up above, think about how many of those touch points are customer facing. The quoting to the customer, how they interact with their account manager to modify their contract or add things to it, how they receive their invoice, how they pay their invoice. All of these components are customer facing. And I like to say that a poor internal quote to cash process absolutely bleeds through to the customer and impacts customer experience. In today's world, in order to win against a highly competitive market, flexibility wins. Never do we want the accounting team to be the bottleneck for the sales team to win a deal. And what I mean by that is the sales team needs flexibility to be able to price and discount and offer terms that help them win, that are obviously structured and within well-defined rules, but that provides them enough flexibility to win. So in order to do that, we need to be able to provide that flexibility on the back end so that finance and accounting can say, yes, we can manage these things from a billing and a rev rec perspective, and that they don't become the bottleneck. And then, of course, we just need to build this to scale. There's a lot of M&A activity out there, global expansion, obviously prioritizing this to expand as your acquisitions happen, product lines change, is very important. So that's a little bit, just an overview of the revenue lifecycle process. Now going into the systems that we recommend or we believe that are involved in that process. are really two core components. One, the front end, which a large majority of customers today use Salesforce. And then on the back end, the ERP, a large majority of customers use NetSuite as their ERP. You can see off to the far left and the far right. On the far left, there's a number of different CPQ solutions that customers are using. Many of them are built for or built to integrate with Salesforce. So obviously Salesforce has their legacy, and I call it legacy now because they've replaced it with RCA, but their old CPQ, their new RCA. And of course, there's a lot of third-party vendors out there that are doing some really nice things on the quoting side. One of them being New.io. Another one that we're seeing is DealHub. But I think regardless of the decision or regardless of the existing CPQ solutions that you have on the front end, what we're going to talk about today mostly is on the back end, and that's NetSuite and ZoneBilling and how we can be agnostic to any front-end CPQ solution. So transitioning to the right-hand side of this, we're essentially trying to turn NetSuite not only into your GL, not only into your chart of accounts or system of record for financial transactions, but turn it into a sophisticated billing and revenue recognition tool. We add on ZoneBilling, which can handle a wide variety of billing models, and we'll talk about that later. Zone Payments to facilitate Stripe and credit card transactions, Zone Reporting for SaaS metrics, and then, of course, leveraging existing NetSuite infrastructure, such as NetSuite's revenue recognition module to make sure that we're forecasting and then also posting revenue in accordance with GAAP. Okay, so I just want to walk through a few things that we're seeing that's impacting trends in billing, trends in revenue recognition. The first and the obvious one that everyone is talking about and adopting is AI. I think a natural way to price and monetize AI is through usage-based billing. One of the most common models we're seeing out there is credit-based models where customers can prepay for credits, draw down against those credits, and then top up when they deplete those credits. So that's a very tricky thing to manage, especially if it's your first adoption of usage-based billing. So we're seeing a lot of that happen in the market. With regards to systems evaluations, we're seeing a shift towards the CIO actually being the final decision maker on these. And I think that comes from a tech stack perspective. CIOs are looking to simplify the tech stacks. They're looking to structure it in a way that's scalable, especially with AI in mind. And how is AI and data ultimately going to be incorporated into the tech stack that we're using? And then just from a market perspective, I recently joined a private equity event a few weeks ago, and it was very clear from the data and the macroeconomics that they've presented that your funding is down this year. We're at all-time lows over the last 5 to 10 years. And what we're seeing is an increase in M&A activity, which, again, introduces complexity and the need to have a quote-to-cash process that can easily adapt as you acquire and onboard new organizations and new products. Okay, so why does this matter? When we talk about the overall process, earlier on, we talked about Salesforce and NetSuite. And our philosophy and SaaS Consulting Group's philosophy is we want to do more with systems that you already have in your tech stack, not introduce new systems that require new integrations. And by doing that, or by introducing ZoneBilling or some of our Zone solutions, we enhance the NetSuite ecosystem or the NetSuite system that you already have today. And we wholeheartedly believe that the ERP should be the financial source of truth for all financial related transactions. And the moment that you strip away very core functions of that, such as billing or such as revenue recognition, your ERP system is at audit risk, for reconciliation data, and the data just available to you is diminished. So what we're going to talk about next year are 3 different very common approaches that we see customers adopting when they're looking to address billing and revenue recognition as part of this overall process flow. And I'm going to hand it off here and let Aaron take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. So as Brad mentioned, yeah, there's 3 approaches that we generally see for managing recurring billing and revenue when we have NetSuite in place. So the first one is ERP centric. So this is going to be native out of the box NetSuite sales orders, billing schedules, and revenue management. Here we're not focusing on suite billing specifically because that is an additional module that adds into native NetSuite functionality. We can touch on pieces of that a little bit here later though. Number 2, CRM centric. So this method might involve tools like Salesforce billing, Revenue Cloud, generally where our billing will generate in a CRM tool and then sync over to NetSuite, either as standalone invoices and credits or just journal entries to represent the GL impact. And then third-party tools. So most of our customers are using tools when they have a third party such as Maxio, Zora, Stripe, and either integrating standalone invoices into NetSuite, similar to the CRM-centric option here, or again, booking journals for the GL impact there. So some of our customers integrate these tools, some of them don't. But want to talk about the kind of pros and cons of each method here. None of these are inherently wrong, right? We have customers who use all of these, but there are strengths and weaknesses. So first option for ERP centric. So some of the strengths, there's a lot of benefits to managing all your billing and revenue in native NetSuite. It's simple. It acts as a central system of record for billing and revenue, and it gives you out of the box controls and support. So when it comes to audit season, that can be pretty beneficial, simplifies the process a little bit. You're able to keep your overhead costs low without additional system licensing, and reconciliation can be easier at month end when trying to tie out your financials. So all of your billing and revenue activity, your subledger, is directly in your ERP and your financial system where you're doing your reporting. There are a couple of downsides or limitations really in managing recurring billing and revenue in native NetSuite alone, right? So sales orders in NetSuite were not built specifically for SaaS companies and recurring billing. So overall subscription management can be challenging. So, there's not out of the box solutions for like evergreen subscriptions, variable billing, really like high volume of amendments. That can be really challenging in NetSuite. Change orders are notoriously difficult, right? So there's no built-in data mediation. Brad was speaking earlier about, enriching your data and really transforming data before getting into that sales order and billing cycle. There's no staging area in NetSuite natively to handle that. Suite billing was built to address some of this, right? So the only downside there, it does come at obviously an additional cost, more licensing, and historically has had some limitations and nuances to it. It's definitely being built up and changed a lot over time. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that, but especially on the revenue side, we'd had early on a lot of limitations on the suite billing front. All right, CRM centric. So when managing recurring billing and revenue out of a CRM, your billing and revenue do align with your sales workflows and provide real-time sales and RevOps visibility, which is really nice and helpful for your upstream teams and keeping alignment between, accounting and your sales folks. This does mitigate some of the upfront integration concerns prior to getting your billing out to customers, right? So you're billing out of the same system that you quoted and built your opportunity in. There can be benefits to that. There's no misalignment between the two. A couple of downsides, however, are, key financial activities are now being taken place outside of your financial system. There's often limited or no accounting controls in place in an external CRM. So that can increase your reconciliation efforts, potentially your audit exposure. depending on kind of what you build to keep controls in place. Usage, rating, and variable billing functionality can be limited. Kind of depends on what system you're in and how it's built out, right? But there can be limitations there. And then revenue recognition is often simple and lacks some of the more nuanced 606 focused revenue functionality that an accounting system offers. NetSuite has a very robust revenue management tool, right? And so we like to use that. It can be also just expensive and time consuming to get it up and running properly. So like I mentioned, sometimes the controls come into place there, making sure that it's running well in a system that is not necessarily built for financial transactions inherently. All right, and then third-party tools. So leveraging a third-party tool is often the selected method for companies with fairly simple recurring revenue and billing. They can be quick to implement and offer really flexible subscription model support, which is great. They scale well for high transaction volume and can generally handle complex pricing and mediation. So most commonly, we see these tools as heavily utilized by our B2C customers and customers that have like heavy self-service subscription models. On the downside with the third-party tools, you do add an additional system to maintain, right? So again, you're increasing your reconciliation efforts and making sure that every month end, your CRM, your accounting tool, and your third-party billing tool are all in sync. There is generally further exposure for audit there in our experience, and your financial systems are now, or financial activities are now taking place in multiple systems. The cost of these tools we generally see increasing as you use more. So as you grow, it raises your total cost of ownership. Not uncommon, right? But not always ideal either. And then reporting and data alignment between systems can become a lot more complex. So we do often see folks, bringing all of their data from all three systems into a BI tool or some other reporting mechanism so that they can get insights from all various systems without the data that they need all consolidated into one. I will pass it back to Brad.
Thanks, Aaron. So what we want to introduce to you guys is somewhat of a fourth approach to this, or really a layering on of one of those approaches, and that's by taking option number one, which is the ERP-centric model, but rather than using native NetSuite functionality, layer on ZoneBilling inside of NetSuite to then address some of these complexities. So ZoneBilling is an entirely built for NetSuite billing solution. That's a prerequisite to being a ZoneBilling customer, is you must first and foremost have NetSuite. But when ZoneBilling is installed into your NetSuite account, we handle the entire order to cash process inside of NetSuite. So we handle different complex pricing models and, of course, the integration with Salesforce. There's various pricing models related to usage data, to digest usage and rate usage for different types of pay-as-you-go models, prepaids, minimum commitments, tiered pricing models. We're still leveraging NetSuite to deliver and send invoices. We're still leveraging NetSuite to collect cash. We're also integrating with NetSuite's RevRec engine to make sure that we're deferring revenue and scheduling revenue appropriately. And then ZoneBilling also introduced better logic to handle mid-lifecycle amendments or cancellations or other ad hoc changes to a contract year. So by introducing ZoneBilling to NetSuite, we essentially take some of those negatives that we talked about, or weaknesses from the ERP-centric model, or at least native NetSuite, and we turn those into positives. NetSuite now becomes purpose-built for SaaS with ZoneBilling. We have strong subscription management. We can handle usage and hybrid billing models. We do have built-in data mediation with inside zones. So we can bring in data, cleanse data, enrich data, and get that data ready for billing. We have the integration to Salesforce, and I mentioned earlier, we're very agnostic to front-end CPQ tools, whether that's Salesforce CPQ, RCA, New, Deal Hub, or there's a few others as well. And then, of course, we handle those robust changes, not only from a billing perspective, but also from a RevRec perspective as well. So when it comes to the value that we deliver, I like to categorize these in 3 different areas. There's one, just the first and foremost, the operational value, the actual day-to-day lives of those who operate billing and revenue recognition. We introduce a lot of automation. We get teams out of Excel. We speed up close cycles and billing cycles. And then we eliminate, managing multiple different applications to handle this process. Then there's the financial value. So I mentioned earlier, we talked about private equity companies or private equity backed companies looking to increase their valuations and have big exits. And a lot of those comes down to improving metrics. So some of those metrics that we often see improvements on when you do address the overall quote to cash process is reduced billing time, FTE efficiency. We see a reduction in DSO, faster invoices out the door that are legible and understandable, result in faster payments. We inevitably find revenue that's just not being billed in the contract, maybe because companies didn't have the mechanism to bill things, so they just go unbilled. So oftentimes we're identifying areas of revenue leakage, we're reducing errors, and then just reducing overall system administration. And then from the strategic side, when you look towards the future, is by having this sophistication and capability on the back end, we then empower the go-to-market teams. We allow them the flexibility that they need to structure pricing and package pricing that allows them to win. By introducing this process, we have better visibility into existing customers and some of the white space. We can help automate renewals and do things like uplifts or CPI uplifts. So we certainly impact net revenue retention and gross revenue retention. We mentioned earlier that customers are on the receiving end of this process. Ultimately, there is a higher customer satisfaction. And then, of course, just future-proofing the organization for future M&A activity. Okay, so we're going to transition a little bit now into the demo portion. But before I do, I'd like to talk about this slide for a second. It's a lot to take in, but this is really, truly the entire end-to-end process flow that we're going to walk through in a moment here in our demo. We're going to start in a Salesforce environment. We're going to start on an opportunity, and we're going to create a quote. That quote is going to be multi-dimensional. It's going to have multi-years and uplifts and ramped pricing and all the things that are very common in today's world. We're going to bring that into NetSuite upon a closed one, and we're going to establish the contract within ZoneBilling. ZoneBilling is then going to drive not only the billing and generate invoices at the right times, but also we're going to drive revenue recognition. So this is, I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this flow here. I mean, this is best in class when it comes to quote to cash automation between Salesforce and NetSuite using ZoneBilling. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. So I'm going to build this scenario first. We're going to act as a data storage company. We sell security and security software. We build fixed recurring. In this scenario, we're going to sign a 3-year ramped deal. So every year is going to have ramped pricing of about 7%. And for this portion, Bobby, I'll let you jump in and take over the Salesforce side, and then I'll come back in when it's time to talk about the NetSuite side.
Okay. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, so as Brad said, here we're starting out with a multi-dimensional quote within CPQ. So here we're defining our start date as June 18th, 2025. We're going to do a 3-year term. And on this quote, we're doing 5 quantity each year, applying a 7% uplift on the pricing. That way we're keeping up with any inflation adjustments, CPI adjustments within the contract, and while keeping that quantity the same. Once we have that quote, here we're going back to the opportunity within Salesforce. So now that we have that quote approved, we've updated our expected revenue. We've updated the amount of the quote. And we also have our products. So we have that single Data Vault Pro product that is a quantity of 5 being ramped 7% each year. This is just a standard Salesforce opportunity. So if there are additional attributes that need to be tracked, typically that's either on the quote or opportunity. And once we have this in a closed won state, then that's where the integration will be initiated from the order that's created from the opportunity. And it will then create a subscription and subscription items within Zone. So now at this point, we are in NetSuite on a Zone subscription record that has not yet been billed. So you can see, due to that ramp pricing setup, on the subscription items, although it's a 3-year contract, we have it broken out in the subscription items, one for each year. And that's to take into account that multi-dimensional pricing that came over from Salesforce. Because this came over via the integration, we're also able to add a field that you can see here that links directly back to that Salesforce order that created this object. That way, if there are any questions as someone is reviewing the data, they don't need to go and search through Salesforce to see what the origination point was. They can just click a link. It immediately takes them to where they can get any extra information that is needed. So now that we have this Zone subscription created, the next step would be to generate a NetSuite invoice. So now at this point, we're in a native NetSuite invoice record. So because it was annual billing, we've created an invoice for that entire first year of the contract. So we've pushed over that amount. We can see the quantity and unit price from year 1 was reflected, along with the start and end dates from year 1. At the same time that we create that invoice in the background, we can also generate, again, a native NetSuite revenue arrangement from those Zone records. So for revenue compliance, we want to make sure over the entire course of the contract, where even though it is ramp pricing, recognize the same amount monthly across all 3 years. So while it was broken out into 3 different subscription items, we've consolidated that down into a single revenue element that has the total value of the item for the contract term. Now, this is entirely configurable. So if you do have a situation where maybe you have a termination for convenience clause in your contract, and you do need to reflect those years as separate revenue elements to stay compliant, that's also entirely possible within Zone via configuration. So now that we have our first year invoice generated, our next scenario is for mid-cycle upgrade. And at the same time, the customer is going to add on an extra product. So they're going to go from the Pro version of Data Vault to Ultra. And we're also going to add on Wave Analytics as an add-on product. So going back to our Salesforce quote, we created a new opportunity and we're creating a new quote here. So for Data Vault Pro, we're setting that quantity down to 0 for each year based on a start date of September 12th, 2025. Now, Salesforce is automatically prorating the remainder of year 1 for us in this, as well as Sorry, I had an audio issue. As well as setting the quantity and price to 0 for year 2 and year 3 on Data Vault. So now our Wave Analytics, and we can add in Data Vault Ultra. Now that year 1 price is going to be prorated again for 9/12/25 through 6/17/2026. And we're going to implement that same 7% uplift on the 2 new products. So after that quote has been closed won in Salesforce, we're going to get a new set of subscription items added to our subscription in NetSuite. So here we have the year 1 prorated values of 9/12 through 6/17/26. First, we have our negatives with the top. Negatives up at the top for the Data Vault Pro. We additionally have the 3 new lines for both Wave Analytics and Data Vault Ultra. And now we can go ahead and bill for the change that happened during year 1's term. So when we generate this amendment invoice, you can see here we have the 2 positive lines at the top for the Data Vault Ultra, Wave Analytics. That's going to be our new positive lines. Because this was a net positive, we're going to get an invoice. If it was a net negative amount, Zone would have automatically generated a credit memo. And as the final line on this invoice, it will be a prorated amount for the return of that original product that they bought. And this way you can do product swaps a lot easier than just in a standard NetSuite environment, and show the customer both this is what you added and this is the refund that you're getting for the partial term you used your original product for. Now, after that amendment, our next step is going to be any changes that need to be taken for revenue recognition. So we've generated that. So we've generated the amendment invoice, and now we go to our changes to our revenue details within Zone. So here we have a negative line that's been added for the total negative amount across all 3 years for Data Vault Pro. And then we've also created 2 new lines for Wave Analytics and Data Vault Ultra. And so these are all going to flow into revenue elements within NetSuite. So here, returning to our updated revenue arrangement, you can see we have an offset line that's come over for Data Vault Pro, and those 2 new positive lines that we saw. This way, we're keeping everything on one revenue arrangement. So for any allocations, you're able to reflect that for that contract, you have one single performance obligation for the entire term. And if you need to have, and if you originally had any like services that were fully discounted that you're allocating to, all the changes are going to stay within that one single record in revenue arrangement within NetSuite. Okay, and I'll turn it back over to Brad here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Bobby, for walking us through that. So just a quick summary for everybody. Hopefully you were able to see just how easy it is for a salesperson who's operating in Salesforce to pick from a product catalog, easily structure a contract with multi-years and ramped pricing, And then through automation, as soon as that's closed and won, we want to bring that information into NetSuite. We don't want the accounting team to have to manually enter anything or manually manipulate everything. We want to make it very easy for the accounting team to just review and approve. And you can see how Zone very easily, especially on that initial contract, creates all the billing schedules and creates all the revenue recognition schedules. But then more importantly, where customers experience the most bottleneck or the most manual work is not really with that original contract, but with everything that potentially could happen during the life cycle of that contract. So as we demonstrated there, it's very easy for somebody to go back into Salesforce, make an amendment. We quickly swapped an older product with a newer product. We did some proration. We also did some ramping. And that, of course, not only updates the credits on the billing side, but it also has revenue recognition impact. And everything that we did there required no manual touch from an accounting perspective. The only person that has to actually make those changes is the salesperson or the account management person on the front end. So very seamless and automated integration there. But that's everything that we had for today. I'm going to leave it open for any questions. I'm monitoring the chat right now. I'm not seeing any come through. I'll leave it open here for another 10 to 15 seconds or so. If anything comes through, happy to answer it. But if not, we can then wrap. And I appreciate everybody joining. All right, I'm not seeing anything come through the chat there. So Aaron and Bobby, thank you guys for the time today. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks.